Welcome, welcome, welcome to Remembering Hrtstory, Unveiling the Bee and the Sacred Feminine. My name is Desiree Elizabeth Mwalimu-Banks. I am calling and joining you today from New York City, Harlem, New York, the Lenape, Munsee, Lenape, and Wapinger First Nations lands. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And I am joined by Laura B. Ferguson, who's the director of the College of the Melissa. It's a deep honor to be a Rahiba and to offer this course in this particular time and place. So the way we're going to do this is I'm going to go ahead and introduce Laura very briefly, and then we are going to talk a little bit about what you can expect from this course, what materials you might need, and what our norms are going to be when we join live during Zoom sessions. And then we're going to dive into the material. So for now, in the spirit of introductions, I'm going to pass it on to Laura B. Ferguson, the director of the College of the Melissa.
Thank you, Desiree. This is so exciting. You're our first official instructor of the new expanding platform of the College of Melissa, celebrating our 10th anniversary. So very excited to be collaborating with you on this and can't wait to experience what you're going to offer. My role in this, for those that are watching later, will just be administration. I'm in the background and you'll see my logo on the screen, but I'm here and you can talk to me in chat. And you can also write to me at queenbee@collegeofthemelissa.com if you have any administration questions, payment questions, those types of things. So thank you so much. And I'm going to sign off and you'll see my logo, but I'm still here. And thank you so much, Desiree, for this class and for all of your offerings within our work. And I'm very honored, grateful, and excited to be doing this with you today and for a long, long time to come.
Me too. Oh my goodness, me too. Thank you so much, Laura. I'm going to share a little bit more about myself and my bee lineage before we go on. When I was 5 years old, I was stung by a bee in my left eye, and it blew up pretty bad. I lost my fear of bees after that and started to become rather curious and strangely calm around them. And since then, bees have continued to buzz into my life at very pivotal moments of transition and rites of passage, and have been great teachers for me. They're still continuing to teach me. I'm also an MFA student at Goddard College in Vermont. I graduate this July, and I've been studying apiary culture, waterkeeping, the sacred feminine, and indigenous identity. I was not born in the States. I was born in Zambia, and that is considered Eastern Africa, but it's south. It's bordered by Zimbabwe, Botswana, and further south, South Africa, but also, Angola. And I was born there. My father is a Black African indigenous man of the Bemba tribe, Luapula province. And my mother is of East Indian descent from northern India in Gujarat, but she was raised in Malawi and then later in Zambia. So that's where I come from. I came to the States when I was 5. So that's a little bit about me and how my gaze it informs my research, my study, my interests. And in my 3rd semester of grad school, I did a very in-depth study on the landscape of beekeeping in New York City, in upstate New York, and also in Zambia in the northern Miombo woodlands. And that information and that report are all available on my website. And I will send that link along with my other links in the chat or to your individual emails later so that you can check that out if you would like. But throughout this process, I found Laura B., the College of the Melissa, and it felt very much like coming home and meeting a part of myself, a part of my soul from many other lifetimes. And so this is a real pleasure and honor to do this work of remembering the sacred feminine. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into the presentation. I'm going to share screen, and here we are. Excuse me, let me get us to where we need to be, and here we are. So, you are in the right space and place. Remembering Hrtstory, Unveiling the Bee. This is module 1. There will be 6 modules that are happening on Mondays. Today is the first. Happy new moon in Gemini. This is also known as the dark moon. It's a great time for planting seeds. So wherever you are, I'm grateful to be a part of the new seed that you're planting in your life, in your world, around honoring this powerful and very relevant, necessary wisdom of the bee. As you know, my name is Desiree Mwalimu-Banks. I'm a Rahiba. I'm also a priestess initiate of Isis. I'm a daughter of Oya in the Yoruba spiritual tradition. I'm a mother of 2 beautiful boys and an interdisciplinary artist. And my partner is a wonderful, amazing man, a musician named Mikkel Mwalimu-Banks. We live in Harlem, New York. And I just wanted to insert a little bit about the College of the Melissa. We are weaving together what Laura B. Ferguson has defined as the 6-fold sacred path of the honeybee, the science, the sacred, the history, the mystery, art, medicine, and activism. What do I need for this course? You need a journal. You need writing and coloring materials, and I'm going to apologize in advance. I live in Harlem, right behind the hospital, so you might hear a few sirens and ambulances passing by. You also need a functional computer to do your research and to be able to join our Zoom sessions. Here's what you can expect. You can expect talking stick shares, meaning there are timed shares. So when it's time to pass on the stick, so to speak, both Laura and myself will be trying to measure the time to make sure that everyone has enough space and equal space to be able to bring their voice into the hive. You can also expect breaks. Being in a Zoom format can be really exhausting, and I don't expect that you will want to constantly be looking at the screen. For this first session, it's great to have everybody's screen on, but as we go forward, I totally understand if you like to have your video off. I do ask that you be mindful of the mute button if you have things going on and you're multitasking. You can also expect some home study. There may be a few activities and journal reflections that I ask of you to bring back to the hive. We are all members of this hive that we are creating together in this class, and so I'm looking forward to sharing that that call, that invitation to activate the space together. You can also expect some safe Zoom space norms, meaning there are certain ways that we address each other or ask questions or honor the speaking time and space of someone else, or even the things that we don't know or that may strike us as new or odd or that may be triggering. In the event that you're ever triggered for any reason whatsoever and you don't feel that you can be on the screen, it's totally 1000% okay to just send me a quick note and go ahead and take your space and take care of your needs. Always feel free to take care of your needs. There's no need to tell me that you are in the bathroom or any of those things. Please feel free to do that. And again, being mindful of what you put in the chat and making sure that you are speaking with intention and just being present. There's an application called Padlet that I'm setting up for our group, and that's how we're going to share community, and it's super fun. You can post anything, and you can comment on people's posts, and it's a private little community that is not available for a bunch of people in a larger platform. It's just us. So I will be setting that up for our next class. So let's jump right in. Today, here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about the sacred feminine Neteru of ancient Kemet and their relationship to bees. And what you're seeing on the left side of the screen is a statue of Isis and a statue of Neith. Neith's name is Pernit, literally means lady of the house of the bee. She has many epithets, but that's one of them. So we're going to briefly touch on Neith. We're going to briefly touch on Sekhmet, but today the areas that you see highlighted in yellow, that's where we're going to spend the bulk of our time, talking about the bee in antiquity in ancient Egypt, and sort of delving a little bit more into the hieroglyphs of the ancient bee in Kemet. The uses of honey in the ritual and mundane we will actually save for later. So, moving forward, a brief introduction to the bee in antiquity. We're going to talk about amber. What you're looking at on the left-hand side is a bee fossilized in amber from Southeast Asia. And through this process of fossilization, bees that are over 100 million years old have been discovered with their bodies preserved in amber. And amber was associated with honey in antiquity because it possessed this ability to immortalize organisms that were once living. And so it was therefore celebrated as the substance and sustenance of the sun in material form. So when we look at amber, we do a deep dive into amber. This alone gives us some very powerful clues about the sacred function of bees and honey in the ancient world. So I'd like to, for a minute, read to you the definition of amber according to Pliny, and who says that the Egyptians called amber sakal, perhaps meaning simply rock, and that the Syrian word was harpax because of its magnetic qualities, and the Greek harpax means a thief or one who snatches. And that's from the Getty, I don't know if you're familiar with getty.edu, but they are a huge research and archive of photographs and archival publications and things that help you to educate yourself on a number of different topics. So I found it quite disappointing that rock was all that they could come up with. So I actually did a deep dive into, I did a deep dive into amber as let's get back into our preview, our presentation mode, into amber and using the hieroglyphs. So in ancient Kemet or Egypt, bees were worshipped as solar emissaries, meaning they were considered the tears of Ra, right? And Ra was interchangeably used with Atum, the god of the sun. The solar boat or pathway marked the progression of the sun along its sojourn across the sky. So the morning sun was called Khepr, which is the Egyptian word for dung beetle. The midday sun was Ra. That's the ancient Egyptian spelling, R-E, not R-A. And then the fading light of dusk was called Atum. He is associated with the completion of cycles. So right there, we have four powerful sets of repeating principles flowing into and out of one another. We have beginning, middle, end, or morning, noon, dusk, or maiden, mother, crone, or new, waxing, waning. And Khepr is really important. There's a beautiful passage that Norman D. Ellis writes about, and I'd like to read it. It's a chant that was found in the Book of Knowing, the Creation of Ra. These are also called the Bremner Rind papyruses, papyri rather. And the chant reads something like, Nuk puem kepra kepri kepru, Nuk puem Ra. Its equivalent meaning is, in the beginning I became the becoming, being what I created. So here we have a powerful definition of who Atum and Ra were. Atum, the life-giving sun god, was known as the great he, she who created himself or herself from the watery chaos of noon. The watery chaos of noon are the primordial waters of creation in the ancient Egyptian origin cosmology. We are told Atum established order, gave birth to the other gods, and created the world. Atum was worshipped as the father of the great Pasejet, or later on called the Ennead, which means nine in the Greek. In Greek. And these are the groupings of 9 gods and goddesses that tell the origin story of creation in Lower Egypt. They are Shu, Tefnut, Geb, Nut, Horus, Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys. I would like to make a little note about the Greek names for the Necheru and then the Kemetic names. I'm going to be using them interchangeably. There has been so much cross-pollination of culture between ancient Greece, ancient Rome, and ancient Egypt. Ancient Egypt predates ancient Greece, predates ancient Turkey, predates ancient Rome. And we're going to see a little bit more about those links and those connections as we go forward in this throughout the whole course. But I'd like to just note that I will be using them interchangeably. This, on the left-hand side, we're looking at a depiction of Ra and Atum sitting back to back. And they are symbolic of equal power, meaning that they were joined or syncretized as one new god. So they were often known as Ra Atum or Atum Ra. And the priests of Ra rose to great power during the 5th and 7th dynasties, so about 4,449 to 2,494 BCE, and 4136 to 2181 BCE, before Common Era. The local god was Tem, which they merged with their god Ra, so that he became Ra Atum. And why is this important? It is very important to talk about the cosmology and the original creation story of ancient Egypt because it's intertwined with the evolution of the bee. And in that evolution, as we unveil, slowly, as we ask for the goddess need to unveil to us her mysteries, we will see how those understandings help us to inform. They help to inform our understanding of the sacred feminine in ancient Egypt. And returning to Ra. So Re, or Ra, whose name means sun in the Kemetic language, was, as we just discussed, associated with Atum. He was the great walker who goes over the same course. His cult of worship was well established during the Old Kingdom in the city of Iunu. We now know this as the Greek city of Hermopolis. His worship is first mentioned in the pyramid texts, which were inscribed on the sarcophagi and walls of the tombs in Saqqara. So let's look at amber. What you're looking at on the right-hand side is the hieroglyph for amber. When we speak about hieroglyphic writing, metaphysical intent was the sole principle of writing. Hieros means sacred or holy. Glyphine, these are both Greek words, means to carve or impress. So when we put those two words together, we get sacred carvings, right? Or holy writings. So hieroglyphs had several different functions. There are ideograms and there are phonograms. Ideograms meaning the word for mouth sounds like, the picture for mouth sounds like what it depicts, right? And then there are phonograms, meaning that there are multiple meanings or there are multiple references contained in that image that refer to other things that may not sound like that word, that letter. So what we're seeing here are the images of a vulture on the left, the far left, an owl, a foot, a mouth, and a mouth, according to the ancient Egyptian alphabet. And Mustafa Gadala, the scholar and teacher, tells us that hieroglyphic writing is imitative, meaning it imitates the object that it represents. It's figurative, meaning that it addresses some aspect of it visually, and then enigmatic, meaning there's a metaphysical element or an allegorical element to the hieroglyph that is important in translating its meaning. So let's go into this. The hieroglyphs A and E are the vulture. Who's the vulture in ancient Egypt? The vulture is sacred to Ast, or Isis, who was later worshipped as Nekhbet, patroness of Upper Egypt and the nurse of the pharaoh. And she holds a shen in her hand, which is the symbol of infinity. As a chthonic goddess, she protected and nourished the dead, which linked her to cycles of death and rebirth. She was also venerated as a symbol of purity. She was known as the mother of mothers in her parthenogenic aspect. Partheno means virgin, Genesis means origin, pure creation. And the ancient Egyptians worshipped the vulture in this aspect because the female vulture is impregnated by exposing herself to the spray of a male without any bodily contact. And so her priestesses, who were called Mu, or mothers, wore robes of white feathers. Here we are looking at images of the goddess Nekhbet. So on the left-hand side, this is from the temple at Komombo. You can see that sort of circular object. It's actually a circle with a horizontal line that holds or rests, upon which the circle is resting. That's on one of the temple walls. And then this is on the right-hand side, the goddess Nekhbet holding the Shen as well. And this is an amulet which is found from the tomb of Tutankhamun. Here we are looking at a unique ushabti, which is known to keep the spirit of the dead inside of it, of Isis, with the Nekhbet crest and scarab. The artist is unknown, but the scarab was very important as an emanation of, as an embodiment of transformation, and Ra, in his aspect as the scarab or Keper, is the rides the boat, right? Is constantly pushing the boat of the sun across the sky, and the dung beetle lives underground for 6 months and then lives the other part of its life out in the air, and it basically is rolling this ball of dung until it's ready to emerge from this ball of dung into this beautiful iridescent form where it flies close to the sun. So it's basically transforming literal shit, into the sun, into light. And so that was one of the reasons why he was worshipped as Keper, always becoming. I am the becoming who became himself, right? That beautiful chant that we read earlier. On the right-hand side, we are looking at a statue of Isis, and this was made between the 1st and 2nd century Common Era. So that means around that time she would have taken on some of the attributes of the Greek goddess Demeter. And again, going back to this cross-pollination of culture that took place between ancient Greece and ancient Egypt, many of their gods took on the qualities or attributes or characteristics of the Neteru. So this is actually Isis wearing, as you can see, the Nekhbet headdress. So this is an image of her sort of embodying the qualities of Nekhbet as well. And we will dive more into Isis at a later time. We're just touching on the little clues that Amber is giving us about the role of the sacred feminine, right? So now we're moving on to the hieroglyph M, the owl. The owl is important. It's venerated as a protector of humans as they transitioned from this world into the realm of the afterlife, celebrated for their keen insight as hunters. And there is a pre-dynastic western delta fortress which bears the name Eagle Owl City. And the late scholar Percy Newberry suggests that this city is Sais, and its ruler prior to King Narmer-Menes is Nethotep, meaning Neith is satisfied. She was a female pharaoh whose royal seal bears the symbol of the goddess Neith herself, later known to the Greeks as Athena. Sais was also the metropolis that formed the colony which opened Egypt to Greek territories on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. So one of the things that we're going to continue to learn and see is the bee was a psychopomp, right? The bee was a guardian of the dead, and it escorted souls into the afterlife, right? The bee, within its own biology, possesses both the honey, the ability to create honey, and the ability to destroy, right? Or to create the venom, right? To produce the venom. And that is something that we will continue to see, again, holding the tension of the honey and the sting, life and death, and rebirth, and the experience of that rebirth. Again, we have the Shen, which represents this experience, this principle of eternity. And later on, we're going to be looking at the lemniscate, which is otherwise known as the figure 8, which also represents this experience of infinity, right? And protection, not just in life, but in death. So, this is an image of Neith on the right-hand side, and that is one of her hieroglyphs, and it is the hieroglyph of a bee. And if you look closely at the dress, her regalia, those are actually hexagonal patterns. It's a hexagonal pattern that looks very much like a honeycomb. So Neith means lady of the house of the bee, among a number of other epithets, and they are great mother, mistress of the bow, ruler of arrows, mother of mothers, mother and father of all things, sorry for the typo, great goddess, lady of the acacia, nurse of crocodiles, her son was Sobek, the crocodile god, mistress of Sais, again was the capital, one of the capitals and seats of power in ancient Egypt, cow of heaven, eye of Ra, we'll get into that later with Sekhmet, and lady of the sycamore house. So here we have two bronze statuettes that depict the Egyptian goddess Neith. On the left-hand side, this is in a private collection. There's an inscription on the base that reads, which we can't see, but that reads, O Neith, may you give life to Hor, meaning Horus, the son of Amun-Erdis, born of the lady of the house of Nehems. This was made during the late period, around 600 before Common Era. And then on the right-hand side, and notice her crown, right? She also has the Wadjet, right, which is also known as the Eye of Ra, on her crown. She was also known as a goddess of war. And here we have another bronze statuette. This is in the Louvre in Paris, made around 664 to 332 BCE, depicting the goddess Neith. Normally, you would see instruments in her hands that are the symbols of her power, so the double arrow, right, and the ankh, which are missing. This is the hieroglyphic sign for Het-Kebit, Temple of Neith at Sais in the Western Nile Delta. The sign at the left represents a walled rectangular building. If you can see that shape, it's a slender building, and then it looks like there's an opening on the right-hand side, like a smaller rectangle contained in that. And it was the palace or the temple or the tomb. The insect, shown right next to this, is the bee. And this is a reprint from E.A. Wallace Budge, who was a very prominent Egyptologist. His book, The Gods of the Egyptian, Studies in Egyptian Mythology. And then the crown on the right is the red crown of Lower Egypt. And the long-stemmed spiral that you see coming out of the base there was a partly unrolled long tongue or proboscis of a honeybee. And that was also redrawn from Sir Alan Gardner's book, Egyptian Grammar. So again, we're seeing the bee, many references to the bee, and its importance, especially in this, again, that last category of the hieroglyphs that we were talking about, the allegorical, enigmatic category. The bee embodied many things, and we're going to keep going and uncover what those are. So from the left to the right, we see the shield of darkness from the disc, the shield emblem of the goddess Neith with crossed arrows. That was one of her symbols, and then here we have two images of Middle Kingdom Egyptian soldiers with their shields. Okay, and something that's also interesting to note is that the shield also resembles a beehive. Moving on, this is another depiction of Neith from the Valley of the Queens in the tomb of Ka'em Waset. Neith was also a mourning goddess. Again, like the bees, she escorted souls into the realm of the dead. She protected, she was a goddess of war. And she is holding hands with Serket, and this is the coffin of Khonsu from the 19th dynasty in Cairo Museum, or 18th. I think that's actually a 19th dynasty in Cairo Museum. And again, here's that hieroglyph above her head as well. And again, her temple, which was located in Sais, was utterly destroyed. So we don't have a whole lot of artifacts that really tell the story of her importance. And this is all Old Kingdom. This is all pre-dynastic Egypt. This is before the arrival of the Greeks and the Romans and the conquering of those civilizations, conquering by those civilizations. The hieroglyph B. Now we're looking at the hieroglyph B, which is the foot or the lower leg, right? And my apologies for the, I see that I misspelled hieroglyph over there. The goddesses of ancient Egypt crossed the heavens on foot. The feet denote the experience of moving forward. And it also depends on what the feet are doing depending on the hieroglyph. Sometimes the feet can mean that we're moving forward, denote forward movement, bringing one's spirit or body towards a goal or towards something. The feet can also denote stability and standing on solid ground. They can also signify, again, going back to this idea of moving forward, she or he who traverses the hidden places. That was one of the ways that Ra was described. And the legs of Nut, the sky goddess, are also said to be those of the dead. They signify an impossibility, as in feet that can walk upon water. That's why you'll also see a lot of images of human heads with wings, because that is how they believed it was a representation, a symbolic representation of how the dead move through the afterlife, right? With feet that were wings, but that still had, a connection to their spirit or their ka, right, and their ba. They signify an impossibility, as in feet that can walk upon water. So the scholar Lawrence Parmley Brown tells us that the feet also make reference to Ma'at, the goddess of truthful law, the foundation upon which knowledge stands. In the Book of the Dead, the deceased in the hall of the double Ma'ati gives the name of his right foot as traveler or guide of the god Kas. Kas is the Theban name, or Kem, which is the name that originates out of Sais, and that of his left foot as the state of the goddess Hathor, Theban, or Nephthys, Sait. So here we have the foot meaning stability and forward movement, standing on truth, standing on the rock of truth, planting one's feet firmly in Ma'at, right? The foundation upon which knowledge stands. My knowledge exists in the truth of divine law, right? Moving on to the hieroglyph R, the mouth, known as the mouth of Ra, refers to the principle of unity. Everything in ancient Egypt was yoked back to this principle of wholeness and unity. And the ancient Egyptians regarded all numbers as divisions of unity, right? Ra was understood as the unifying principle of creation. Through the mouth of Ra, the known universe came into being. The mouth of Ra was also used to define fractions as parts of the whole, and they represented the ratio of the whole to its parts. And the author and archpriestess of Isis, Normandy Ellis, writes, the opening of the mouth ceremony was an important rite of transformation that enabled a soul to affirm, to pray, to invoke, and to give thanks. So when we put all of these meanings together, all of these various translations, we can begin to understand that amber is referred to in its practical function, and in its metaphysical meaning, right? Amber is not simply a rock to the ancient Egyptians. Amber was the hardened material evidence of the sun's rays as evidence through the gods Atum and Ra. Amber was also the substance of life-giving nourishment, the protection in the journey from death to the afterlife, and therefore transformation. Again, Ra in his aspect as Keper, right? It was a symbol of divine law, Ma'at, and the power and purity of the sacred feminine, Neith, Serket, Isis, and Nekhbet. Amber would later be known to the Greeks as Electron, a symbol of their sun god Elector, who was worshipped as the awakener. So I'm going to stop share. I don't know if anyone can hear that, but I'm going to go ahead and stop share and invite you to take a break and think a little bit about what some of these connections mean to you. What comes up for you when you hear about the etymology of amber, and how can we begin to understand the importance of the bee through this lens of amber? Again, amber immortalized organisms that were once living. Honey in ancient Egypt was used to embalm the dead, right? So there are some interesting resonances. And so I'm going to invite you to think about that. Feel free to color in your journal, create a picture, write a question. If you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat. And we will return in 6 minutes. Welcome back. Welcome back. So we are going to go ahead and move into the next segment. And again, so right now, if you have any insights, any reflections on what we talked about, and you want to put that in the chat, please feel free to do so. Or you can just keep it in your journal, and we will review it next time that we meet. Again, we'll be engaging with one another in the Padlet platform, which is it's an interdisciplinary platform that allows you to post anything and to reply to anybody's response. But it's a private community. It's not on some other, you know, metadata experience. It's just private. So again, those links will be sent out after class. So let's go ahead and go back to the presentation. Feel free to, if you would like your video off, that's fine. Again, going back to our norms, do not expect that you constantly look at the screen. That's okay. If you need to get up and move around, that's fine too. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share screen now. And we're going to go back to the presentation. And we are here. Okay. So the bee in ancient Egypt. From everything that we can see in our deep dive into Neith, Ra, Atum, Neith-Hotep, bees were associated with royalty in ancient Egypt, and with the king specifically. Many examples of bee hieroglyphs exist in ancient Egypt, so I'd just like to use this opportunity to look at some of those images. So right now this is, we're looking at a wall art depiction of bees and honey. And again, hieroglyphs had three functions. They were literal, they were figurative, and they were enigmatic or allegorical. There was a mystical element. So here you can see, so there's something about its use that is being shared here, but there's also something about its spiritual significance that's being shared here. And then there's an element of mystery here as well that, you know, as you can see, we're still unraveling together right now. Here are some examples of hieroglyphs of the bee and their many meanings. So Niswat Biti, he of the sedge and the bee. We can see the bee on the left-hand corner. The king, the hieroglyph for the king, he the king of Upper and Lower Egypt. That's what the bee meant. The bee was a symbol of power, the power of the king to rule Upper and Lower Egypt. Sama Tawi, uniter of the lands, red and white crown patient. Again, here we're looking at that crown of Neith-Hotep, that red crown that has a partially rolled tongue protruding from the base, which again is the proboscis of the bee, the ancient honeybee. And again, the king of Upper and Lower Egypt. So figure A, he of the sedge and the bee. Figure B, the sealer of the king of Lower Egypt. C, the bee. And honey. Depending on what other images or ideograms you can see, it takes on different meanings. This was honey. Honey was also traded. Honey was traded in ancient Egypt. It was highly desirable commodity. That was also transported up and down the Nile as well. It was a form of currency. Then we have figure E, beekeeper. F, again, another a beekeeper that is sitting down. So depending on the different ideograms, it changes the nuances of the meaning. And then the last figure is the hieroglyph for the chief beekeeper of Amun. So we can see a vessel there, the hieroglyph for a loaf of bread, again, because the ancient Egyptians used honey to make honey cakes. We can see also the reed. And so, again, the deeper you go into this and you go into each, I mean, you could spend an hour or so on just one of those hieroglyphs. Again, because their meanings are so complex and nuanced. This is an image of the ancient Egyptians baking honey cakes in ancient Egypt. And here we're looking at some of the earliest depictions of beekeeping, which come from the tombs of ancient Egypt around 2400 before Common Era. Bees were kept in cylinders made from reeds and covered in mud hives. And these practices are still being kept alive today by certain beekeepers in the area. Ancient Egyptian beekeepers were also constantly moving and migratory. So they put hives, as I mentioned earlier, on rafts that could float up and down the Nile River to scavenge for where the best forage was located for the bees. And we also see honey in the tombs of the pharaohs, including King Tutankhamun. The honey recovered from these tombs was still edible. And so, again, it says, proving that honey never spoils, honey again has this embalming, immortalization, energetic, right? Just like amber resin, as we discovered earlier. This is the bee in ancient Egypt. This is the base of a funerary cone with the details of hieroglyphs. This is made out of clay. This is New Empire, 1550 to 1069 before Common Era. Saqqara Memphite region, the necropolis at Memphis, otherwise known as the necropolis at Memphis. This is in the Lou, the collection of the Lou. And in this hieroglyph, we can again see the reeds, we can see the owl, and then just above that, we can see the bee, the hieroglyph of the bee. We also have another bird here, looks like the hawk. So again, just more evidence that the bee had a prominent role in the everyday life and also spiritual worship of the ancient Kemetic people. This is a detailed carving in the Karnak temple complex in Luxor. And again, we can see that the Ankh is being flanked by two bees on this pillar. And if anyone has ever been to the Karnak temple complex in Luxor and has seen this, please feel free to drop it into the chat or share your findings. We'll have a little time to share afterwards what came up for you and what some of your personal experiences and connections to the bees are. We're looking from down below into the sky of a relief of a series of hieroglyphs of the Ankh, which is known as the key of life. Bees were also known to hold the key of life, right? The key of life, which is not just the honey and the sweet, but it is also the loss and the death and the sting, right? The key of life and the honeybees at the temple of Amun. And this is also in Luxor, in Karnak. So we can see again an Ankh, the bee, the hieroglyph for bread. This cylinder-like shape is known as a cartouche, right? The elongated form of the shen. All right. This is a symbol of Mernith or Merit Neat or Meriet Neat or Merit Neith. She was a regent of ancient Egypt during the first dynasty who is believed by many Egyptian scholars to have been a ruler of Egypt in her own right. Her rule was said to have occurred in the 30th century before Common Era for a period of time that is unknown. Mernith's name means beloved by Neith, and her stela, this is her stela, contains symbols of that deity. So again, we're seeing the crossed arrows, which later on in ancient Greece we see showing up as the double axe or the labrys, right? And this concludes this portion of our time. This was a soft introduction. So in June, we're going to be entering the shrines of Sekhmet and Neith. I kept hearing my mother tell me to make a way for her. So what I've done is I've taken you from the primordial creation stories and the waters of Noon and the stories of Ra and the Ennead to a place that actually will bring you to the feet of Sekhmet, because in order to talk about the bee and the solar I of Ra, we have to talk about Sekhmet, who is known as she who was before all the gods were. So we're kind of going forwards to go backwards. So on the left is a picture of Sekhmet, and on the right we're seeing again a picture of Neith with that beautiful regalia, the dress that she has on, which have those hexagonal patterns that are reminiscent of honeycombs, and the hieroglyph of the bee over her head, and our two honeybees, just sharing some gold glitter. So our next class is not going to be until June the 20th, and here's why. I am leaving on Friday for a residency with Wavefarm Radio. An amazingly talented sound design artist and myself, his name is Grant Cutler, are doing a collaborative residency at Wavefarm Radio's headquarters in Hudson, and we will be investigating and measuring electromagnetic radiation waves in and around beehives in the Hudson and also along the water. And we're going to be turning those signals into sound to create an installation out of that. We'll also be broadcasting. So I'm going to send links for that. So if you're interested in tuning in to WGXC, Wavefarm Radio, out here in Hudson, New York on the East Coast, you can still listen and tune in. We'll be broadcasting in the middle of the night, late night. A few of those broadcasts will be late night, and putting together a series of installations that describe the work that we've done and the research that we are very grateful to be engaging in with some of the local bee guardians in Hudson.
Fliedermaushaus.